Through the vast observation window of the stellar vessel Path of Glory, Fleet Commander Du-1 watched Earth rotate slowly against the backdrop of endless stars. His scaled fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the metallic command console, each tap echoing his growing impatience. The blue planet, wrapped in its thin atmosphere and white clouds, looked remarkably fragile from this distance. The bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of his crew, each member focused on their designated tasks. Holographic displays cast a soft blue glow across their scaled faces as they monitored Earth's defensive capabilities, or rather, the lack thereof. "Primitive," Du-1 muttered, his tongue flicking out briefly to taste the recycled air. "They haven't even established a proper lunar colony." He turned to his second-in-command, Jimin, who stood at attention nearby. Her iridescent scales caught the light from the surrounding console displays, creating small rainbow patterns on the polished floor. "What do our latest scans reveal?" Du-1 asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd been studying this planet for the past 3 solar cycles. Jimin pulled up a detailed holographic display of Earth's orbital defenses. Their satellites are mostly for communication and weather monitoring. Their most advanced weapons are based on chemical propulsion and nuclear fission. She paused, her head tilting slightly. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, not even basic gravity manipulation technology. Du-1's facial scales rippled in what his species considered a smile. 17 worlds, he said softly. "I've brought 17 worlds into the coalition. Some fought, some surrendered, but all of them had at least achieved basic space travel capabilities." He gestured toward Earth. "These humans, they've barely touched their own moon." The bridge crew continued their work as Du-1 walked around the central command platform. The invasion plans were already set. The coalition's policy was clear. Any species capable of achieving spaceflight, however primitive, needed to be either incorporated or eliminated. They couldn't risk letting potentially dangerous civilizations develop independently. "Bring up the tactical display," Du-1 ordered. A 3-dimensional map of Earth materialized in the center of the bridge. Red dots highlighted major population centers and military installations. Their forces are divided into separate nations. They still fight among themselves for resources and territory. Jimin zoomed in on several military bases. Their aircraft are subsonic or low supersonic at best. Their naval vessels are confined to the surface of their oceans. She shook her head, scales shimmering. "This might be our easiest conquest yet." Du-1 walked through the hologram, studying the terrain and defensive positions. "Deploy our atmospheric sensors. I want detailed weather patterns for all planned landing zones. Position our stealth observers above their major military installations." He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the first wave of ships for deployment." Standard conquest protocol. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, sending out commands to the rest of the fleet. Outside the observation window, smaller vessels began detaching from the larger ships, their silver hulls glinting in the sunlight as they moved into position. "Sir," one of the junior officers called out, "we're detecting unusual radiation patterns from their communication satellites." Du-1 walked over to the officer's station. "Explain." "They're using a wide range of frequencies, far more than necessary for basic communication. Some patterns suggest they might be attempting to detect objects in orbit." "Can they detect our ships?" Jimin asked, joining them at the console. The junior officer shook his head. "Our cloaking technology is far beyond their detection capabilities, but the variety in their scanning methods is unexpected for their level of technology." Du-1 considered this information. In his experience, most species at this development stage use standardized communication methods. The humans' varied approach was unusual, but ultimately irrelevant. "Begin the final countdown," Du-1 announced. "Launch the first wave at dawn over their eastern continent. Standard shock and awe tactics. Let them see our power before we offer them the choice to surrender." As the crew prepared for the invasion, Du-1 returned to the observation window. Earth continued its peaceful rotation, its inhabitants unaware of the fleet poised to change their civilization forever. He had done this 17 times before, and each conquest had ultimately strengthened the coalition. These humans would be no different. "Sir," Jamin approached him quietly. "The first wave is in position. We await your command." Du-1 nodded, his scales reflecting the blue light of Earth. "Send the message to all ships. Operation begins at dawn." He paused, watching a weather system swirl across Earth's surface. "Another primitive species to add to our collection. This will be a simple conquest indeed." If only he knew how wrong he was. The first rays of sunlight crept over Earth's eastern horizon as the Coalition's invasion force descended through the atmosphere. Du-1 stood at his command post, watching the holographic display track his ship's progress. The first wave consisted of 50 advanced assault vessels, each carrying enough firepower to level a small city. All ships reporting optimal entry vectors, He-Jin announced from her communication station. Her claws moved swiftly across the control interface, monitoring the incoming data streams. "Atmospheric conditions are within expected parameters." Du-1 nodded, his scales shifting to a deeper shade of blue in satisfaction. He had overseen enough invasions to know how this would play out. First would come the panic as humans realized they weren't alone in the universe. Then the futile attempts at resistance. Finally, the inevitable surrender. "Sir, first wave has reached the cloud layer," Jamin reported, beginning final approach to target cities. The holographic display showed the ships spreading out in a perfect formation. Their first targets were military installations along the eastern coastline of the continent they had identified as North America. Du-1 expected the humans' primitive radar systems would detect the ships any moment now. "Strange," He-Jin suddenly said, her head tilting. "I'm detecting unusual signal patterns from the surface." "Explain," Du-1 ordered, walking to her station. "The humans are using their communication networks in an unexpected way. The patterns are coordinated, different from their usual chaos." Before Du-1 could respond, one of the ship markers on the holographic display suddenly turned red and vanished. "Sir," He-Jin's voice rose in alarm. "We've lost contact with the stellar hunter." "Impossible," Du-1 hissed. "What happened?" More red indicators began appearing across the display. He-Jin's claws flew across her console. Multiple ships reporting simultaneous attacks. They're using some kind of guided projectile system, but the targeting is far more precise than their known technology should allow. Du-1 watched in growing disbelief as more ships vanished from the display. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were coordinating their defense with an efficiency he had never seen in a pre-spaceflight civilization. "Pull up visual feeds from the remaining ships," he ordered. The main display split into multiple views. Du-1 saw streams of missiles rising from hidden locations, their trajectories shifting unpredictably. Human aircraft were emerging from underground hangars, using terrain features to mask their approach until the last possible moment. "Sir, they're using their primitive communication networks to link their defense systems," Jamin reported, her scales pale with concern. "They're sharing targeting data across their entire continent. Each weapon system is learning from the others." Another ship vanished from the display. He-Jin's voice crackled with urgency. "The humans are adapting their attack patterns. They're studying our ship's defensive capabilities and adjusting their strategies in real time." Du-1 watched as a human missile struck one of his ships. The Coalition vessel's shields should have easily deflected the primitive weapon, but somehow the humans had modulated their warheads to create resonance patterns that weakened the shield harmonics. "Impossible," he whispered. "They couldn't have developed this technology so quickly. They couldn't have predicted our shield frequencies." "Sir," Jamin's voice was tense. "The humans are now using their ground-based energy transmission stations to create interference fields. Our ship's sensor systems are being disrupted." The situation deteriorated rapidly. Human fighters were now executing coordinated attacks, using their supposedly inferior weapons in ways that maximized their effectiveness against Coalition technology. They weren't just fighting. They were innovating in the middle of battle. All ships, retreat to high orbit, Do-1 ordered. His pride burned at giving the command, but he couldn't risk losing more vessels to these unexpectedly capable defenders. As the surviving ships pulled back, Do-1 studied the battlefield data. The humans had somehow taken their existing technology, primitive by coalition standards, and adapted it into an effective defense system in mere minutes. They had analyzed coalition weaknesses and developed countermeasures faster than any species he had ever encountered. Begin full analysis of all combat data, he ordered. I want to know exactly how they did this, and get me everything we have on human learning and adaptation patterns. Hajin looked up from her console, her scales showing patterns of confusion and respect. Sir, initial analysis suggests the humans used their global information network to share combat data in real time. They turned their entire planet into a single learning defense system. Do-1 turned back to the main viewport, watching Earth rotate below them. For the first time in his long career of planetary conquest, he felt something he had never expected to feel toward a primitive species: uncertainty. Perhaps, he said quietly, we need to reassess our definition of primitive. In the dimly lit research chamber aboard the Path of Glory, Research Director Sung-Min's scales glowed with excitement as he displayed holographic images of Earth's history. Do-1 had never seen the usually calm researcher so animated. Commander, what we've discovered about the humans is remarkable, Sung-Min said, manipulating the holographic controls to show ancient battlefield scenes. Their recorded history spans thousands of years, and in all that time, they have never stopped fighting or learning. Do-1 moved closer to examine the images. They showed humans fighting with primitive weapons, first with sticks and stones, then metal weapons, and eventually machines. Each era showed remarkable advances in tactics and technology. Here's what makes them unique, Sung-Min continued, bringing up a new set of data streams. Most species we've encountered evolved through periods of peace and war. But humans, they've been in a constant state of competition and conflict. Yet instead of destroying themselves, they'd grown stronger. The display shifted to show various human civilizations rising and falling. Look at this pattern. When one human society develops an advantage, others quickly learn and adapt. They turned warfare into an engine of innovation. Do-1 watched as the presentation showed humans advancing from simple tools to complex machines in what seemed like an impossibly short time. How long did it take them to go from their first powered flight to reaching their moon? 66 years, Sung-Min replied. For comparison, most species take at least 300 years to make the same journey. The commander's scales rippled with concern. Show me their extinction events. New images appeared. Massive climate changes, diseases, natural disasters. Each time, human population numbers would drop dramatically, but then surge back stronger than before. They don't just survive these events, Sung-Min explained. They learn from them. Each crisis makes them more resilient. After every near extinction, they develop new technologies, new social structures, new ways of living. Do-1 studied a particularly interesting data set about human diseases. They turned their own illnesses into weapons against those illnesses. Yes, vaccines. They take the very things that could kill them and transform them into protection. No other species we've encountered has thought to do this. It's just one example of how they turn threats into advantages. The display shifted again, showing human military installations across their planet. Their divided nature makes them even more dangerous, Sung-Min continued. Each human nation develops its own solutions to problems. Then, through competition or cooperation, they share and improve upon each other's innovations. Like they did during our attack, Do-1 mused, remembering how quickly the humans had adapted their weapons. Exactly. What we witnessed wasn't a pre-planned defense. They were literally inventing new ways to fight us in real time, sharing their successes across their global network, and immediately implementing improvements. Sung-Min brought up simulation after simulation of potential invasion scenarios. In each one, The humans found unexpected ways to counter coalition advantages. Their responses never followed predictable patterns. Their adaptability makes them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means, some men said. Even if we destroyed half their planet, the survivors would likely find a way to strike back at us. They've evolved through so many disasters that hardship just makes them more innovative. Do-1 watched the final simulation play out, a scenario where the coalition deployed its full military might against Earth. Even in this extreme case, pockets of humanity survived and found ways to retaliate. There's something else you need to see, some men said quietly, pulling up one last data set. This is their entertainment media, their stories. The display showed countless tales of humans facing alien invasions. Do-1's scales paled as he realized the implications. They've been preparing for us without even knowing we exist. Not just preparing. They've been imagining and solving these scenarios for generations. In their stories, humanity almost always prevails against technologically superior invaders. They've been training their minds to think about these challenges for centuries. Do-1 turned away from the display, his mind racing with the implications. You're telling me we're not just fighting their current capabilities. We're fighting against the combined imagination and problem-solving skills of their entire species, refined through countless conflicts and crises. Precisely, some men confirmed. And there's one more thing. He hesitated before continuing. They're getting faster at adapting. The more pressure we put on them, the more quickly they innovate. It's as if conflict itself energizes them. The commander stared out at the blue planet below. What had seemed like an easy conquest now looked like the biggest challenge the coalition had ever faced. These humans weren't just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were something entirely new. Keep studying them, Do-1 ordered. We need to understand everything we can about how they think, how they fight, how they survive. Because if we can't beat them, he paused, considering his next words carefully. We might need to learn from them instead. The emergency alarms on the path of glory blared for the third time that day. Do-1 rushed to the command center, his scales darkening with stress. The past 3 months had turned into a nightmare he couldn't have imagined. Status report, he demanded, taking his position at the central command station. Ji-Min pulled up the latest battlefield displays. Sir, we've lost contact with Base 7 in their region called Australia. Initial reports showed humans breaching the perimeter using our own technology. The main screen showed the last transmitted images from the base. Do-1's scales rippled in disbelief as he watched human soldiers wielding modified coalition energy weapons. Their versions somehow bypassed the base's shield systems completely. How did they do this? Do-1 asked, studying the footage. Those weapons shouldn't even function in human hands. The biolocks should prevent it. They didn't break the biolocks, one of the technical analysts reported. They completely rebuilt the weapons from scratch. And they improved them. More reports flooded in from around the planet. Each human nation seemed to be developing different approaches to fighting the coalition forces. Some focused on stealth technology, others on weapons development, and still others on electronic warfare. Look at this, Ji-Min said, bringing up new footage. The humans in what they call Finland have developed some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon that shorts out our communication systems. The ones in Brazil have found a way to detect our cloaked ships using their rainforest canopy as some kind of natural sensor array. Do-1 watched as another coalition base went dark. This one had been attacked by human forces using sound waves to disrupt the crystalline structure of coalition energy shields. It was a simple solution that none of their engineers had ever considered possible. They're not just copying our technology, he realized. They're understanding the underlying principles and finding new ways to apply them. Each human group approaches the problem differently, and then they share their successes. The main screen shifted to show a global map of coalition losses. Their bases were falling one by one, each to a different innovative tactic. Traditional military doctrine called for enemies to be predictable. They should concentrate forces, establish clear chains of command, and use standardized tactics. The humans did none of these things. Each region fought differently. When the coalition adapted to one tactic, they faced something completely new in the next battle. It was like fighting thousands of different armies at once. "Sir," He Jin called from her station, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from their lunar surface." The display shifted to show the moon. Several human bases had appeared there, seemingly overnight. They were using coalition technology to create some kind of massive energy collection array. "Those weren't there yesterday," Jigmin said, her voice tight with concern. "How did they build them so quickly?" "They're learning exponentially," the technical analyst explained. "Each time they capture one of our bases, they don't just gain our technology. They understand it, improve it, and implement those improvements immediately." Do-Won watched as another base fell to human forces. This time, they had somehow turned the coalition's own gravity manipulation technology against them, creating localized fields that made it impossible for his troops to move effectively. "Sir," Jae-min said quietly, "we need to consider the possibility that we can't win this war. Not through conventional means." The commander studied the tactical display. His forces still held technological superiority in many areas, but the humans were closing the gap at an alarming rate. Worse, they were developing entirely new technologies that the coalition had never even conceived of. "Show me the projected timeline," he ordered. The analysis appeared on screen. At the current rate of human advancement, they would match coalition technology within months. And once they reached that point, their tendency to improve upon everything they touched suggested they would quickly surpass it. 3 months, Do-Won said softly. In 3 months, they'd gone from primitive chemical weapons to building their own energy shields and gravity manipulators. No species in coalition history has ever adapted so quickly. A new alarm sounded. Another base had fallen, this time to human forces using some kind of biological countermeasure that specifically targeted coalition life support systems. "They're not just fighting us," Do-Won realized. "They're using this war to accelerate their own development. Every battle, every engagement, every piece of technology they capture, it's all feeding into their rapid evolution as a species." The command center fell silent as this truth sank in. They had intended to subjugate a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened something unprecedented in the galaxy, a civilization that thrived on challenges and grew stronger with every attempt to destroy it. Looking at the continuing reports of human innovations, Do-Won understood they had reached a breaking point. But it wasn't the humans who were breaking. It was everything the coalition thought they knew about warfare, about technology, and about the nature of intelligence itself. Security Chief Tai Young stood before the Coalition War Council, his scales dulled with exhaustion. The holographic displays behind him showed the latest tactical updates from Earth, a stream of data that told a story of continuous coalition defeats. "The humans have developed a new pattern," Tae-Yum began, bringing up footage from their latest losses. "When we destroy their infrastructure, they don't just rebuild. They improve. Each destruction becomes an opportunity for advancement." Do-Won watched from his command chair as images played across the screen. A destroyed human city appeared, its ruins still smoking. The next image, taken just weeks later, showed the same city rebuilt with shield generators and energy systems salvaged from coalition technology. "Look at this example," Tae-Yum continued, zooming in on a human settlement they had cut off from power and resources. "We expected them to surrender. Instead, they developed miniature fusion reactors using scraps from our damaged ships. They're now energy independent." The council chamber filled with murmurs of disbelief. One of the coalition's most effective strategies had always been resource denial, but the humans seemed to view scarcity as a challenge rather than a defeat. "Their response to isolation is even more remarkable," Tai-Young said, showing new data. "When we cut off their communication networks, They created new ones using principles we've never seen before. They're now using the natural magnetic fields of their planet to transmit data. Do-1 leaned forward as footage played of another coalition stronghold falling to human forces. This time, the humans had used swarms of tiny drones, each one barely larger than an insect. The drones had overwhelmed the base's defenses through sheer numbers and coordination. They learned from every encounter, Tae-young explained. When our weapons prove effective, they don't just develop countermeasures. They improve the underlying technology and turn it back on us. Our own weapon designs are being used against us in ways we never imagined. The display shifted to show human military formations. They operated in small, independent units, each capable of adapting to any situation. When one unit discovered an effective tactic, all others immediately incorporated it while adding their own innovations. Their military structure defies our understanding, Tae-young continued. We expected a hierarchical command system like every other species we've encountered. Instead, they operate with something they call mission command. Central coordination, but local innovation. Do-1 watched as human forces demonstrated this principle in action. A small unit, cut off from command, had improvised a way to use coalition shield technology to create a massive energy pulse. They had shared this discovery instantly across their networks, and within hours, human forces worldwide were using variations of the technique. Most concerning is their response to victories, Tae-young said, his voice growing darker. When they succeed, they don't rest. They immediately begin looking for ways to improve their success. Every victory becomes a starting point for further innovation. The council chamber fell silent as they watched humans rapidly adapting coalition technology for purposes its creators had never intended. They were using medical scanners as weapon targeting systems, turning waste recyclers into matter replicators, and modifying environmental shields into offensive weapons. Our psychological warfare has proven equally ineffective, Tae-young reported. When we demonstrate our superior technology, instead of being intimidated, they become more determined to understand and surpass it. Fear seems to motivate them rather than subdue them. Do-1 stood and walked to the main display, studying the pattern of human advancement. How long until they match our technology level completely? At current rates, Tae-young brought up the analysis. Weeks, not months. But that's not the worst part. He paused, his scales showing patterns of deep concern. They're not just matching our technology. They're taking it in directions we never considered. They're already developing applications we thought impossible. The display showed human scientists working with coalition technology, their experiments producing results that defied the coalition's understanding of physics itself. They weren't just learning to use advanced technology. They were rewriting the rules of how it worked. We thought we were dealing with primitive warriors, Do-1 said quietly. Instead, we found something unprecedented. A species that thrives on challenges, that grows stronger under pressure, that turns every setback into an opportunity for advancement. The council chamber remained silent as this truth sank in. Their attempt to conquer Earth hadn't just failed. It had accelerated human development beyond anything they could have predicted. They had intended to subjugate a primitive species, and instead had created something entirely new. A civilization that had learned to turn. Ambassador Min-seo stood in the Grand Council chamber of the Path of Glory, surrounded by the highest-ranking members of the coalition fleet. The room's crystalline walls reflected the light from Earth visible through the observation windows, casting blue shadows across the assembled aliens. Look at these numbers, Min-seo said, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's technological progress. 6 months ago, they were launching chemical rockets. Now they're building their own faster-than-light drives, using principles we never considered. Do-1 watched from his command seat as the data scrolled past. Each graph, each chart told the same story. Human advancement wasn't just fast, it was accelerating. The more they learned, the faster they learned. We have two choices, Min-seo continued, her scales shifting to display patterns of earnest concern. We can continue this war until they surpass us completely, or we can try to make peace while we still have something to offer them. The council chamber filled with murmurs. A war commander named Seo Jin stood up, his battle-scarred scales glinting. Make peace. They've destroyed half our invasion force. They've taken our technology and turned it against us. Exactly, Min Seo replied. And what does that tell you about their potential as allies rather than enemies? The display shifted to show various human innovations. They had taken coalition shield technology and found ways to make it project force fields. They had modified medical scanners into devices that could see through walls. They had even improved the efficiency of coalition energy systems by 30%. Every species in the coalition brings its own strengths, Min Seo explained. Some bring resources, others bring military might or cultural achievements. But the humans, they bring innovation itself. They turn problems into progress. Do-One watched as more data filled the screens. Human scientists had already begun theorizing applications of coalition technology that had never occurred to its inventors. They approached problems from angles that seemed impossible until they proved them possible. Their divided nature, which we saw as a weakness, is actually their greatest strength. Min Seo continued. Each human group approaches problems differently. When they share solutions, they don't just copy them, they improve them, combine them, find new ways to use them. The ambassador brought up footage from Earth's surface. Humans were already building cities that combined their own architecture with coalition technology, creating structures that were both beautiful and more efficient than either civilization had achieved alone. They don't just adapt, Min Seo said softly. They improve. Everything they touch becomes something new, something more than it was before. Imagine that capability working with us instead of against us. The council chamber grew quiet as they considered this possibility. For 1,000 years, the coalition had grown through conquest, absorbing species that could contribute to their civilization. But they had never encountered a species that could transform their civilization itself. What guarantee do we have that they won't turn against us? Seo Jin asked, his voice heavy with concern. Min Seo brought up studies of human culture. They value cooperation as much as competition. When they find common ground with former enemies, they become fiercely loyal allies. Their history is full of former adversaries becoming their strongest partners. Do-One stood and walked to the main display. Show them the projection, he ordered. The hologram shifted to show two possible futures. In one, the war continued until the humans eventually overtook and defeated the coalition. In the other, a peaceful alliance led to unprecedented advancement for both civilizations. We started this war believing we were superior, Min Seo said. Now we know better. The humans don't just learn, they transform. They don't just adapt, they innovate. Every challenge we've given them has made them stronger. The council members watched as more data showed human advancement rates. Their progress wasn't linear or even exponential. It was recursive, each breakthrough leading to multiple new breakthroughs in an endless cycle of innovation. The choice is clear, Min Seo concluded. We can continue fighting until they surpass us completely, or we can help guide their advancement and share in their journey. We came to conquer them, but perhaps we should be learning from them instead. The council chamber fell silent as the truth of her words sank in. They had thought themselves the teachers, coming to uplift a primitive species. Instead, they had found something far more valuable. A civilization that could teach them new ways of thinking, new ways of advancing, new ways of seeing the universe itself. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Coalition's Central Space Station gleamed with crystalline light as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered for the historic occasion. Do-One stood on the central platform, his scales now bearing the marks of wisdom earned through hard lessons. Beside him stood the human delegation, scientists, leaders, and warriors who had turned an invasion into an opportunity for advancement. They wore their own uniforms, enhanced with coalition technology they had already improved upon. Their presence in this hall marked the beginning of a new era. Members of the coalition, Do One began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. 8 months ago, we thought we knew what humanity was. We were wrong. The holographic displays activated, showing Earth's remarkable journey. From a seemingly primitive world to a civilization that had mastered and improved upon coalition technology in mere months. We came as conquerors, Do One continued. We expected to find another species to add to our collection. Instead, we found something unique in the galaxy, a civilization that turns challenges into catalysts for growth. The displays showed scenes from the conflict, human innovations, adaptations, and improvements that had transformed both Earth and coalition technology. Each defeat they had suffered had led to multiple breakthroughs. The humans have taught us something profound, Do One said. True strength lies not in the weapons we possess or the numbers we command, but in our ability to learn, adapt, and grow. In this, humanity stands alone among all known species. The human representatives stood tall as Do One spoke. They had earned their place here not through submission, but through their remarkable spirit of innovation and determination. Therefore, I propose a new law, Do One announced. The Earth Directive. It shall state that humanity must never be approached with intentions of conquest or subjugation. Their unique gifts make them too valuable to risk losing. The assembly murmured as the implications became clear. For the first time in its history, the coalition would declare a species off limits, not because they were too weak to be worth conquering, but because they were too valuable to risk antagonizing. Look at what they have achieved, Do One continued, gesturing to new displays showing human innovations. They took our shield technology and created energy projection systems we thought impossible. They transformed our medical scanners into devices that can see through time itself. They improved our faster-than-light drives using principles that our scientists are still trying to understand. The humans had brought examples of their improvements. Coalition scientists studied them with a mixture of awe and confusion, seeing their own technology transformed in ways they had never imagined possible. But their greatest strength, Do One said, his voice growing softer, is not their intelligence or their creativity. It is their unity in diversity. Each human group thinks differently, approaches problems differently, sees possibilities we never imagined. When they share their insights, they don't just copy. They combine, improve, and transform. The assembly watched as displays showed human cities rebuilding, stronger and more advanced than before. Their civilization had not just survived the invasion. It had used it as a springboard for unprecedented growth. The Earth Directive will serve as both a warning and a guide, Do One explained. Any species considering hostile action against Earth should know. Humans do not break under pressure. They transform it into progress. They do not submit to superior force. They learn from it, improve upon it, and surpass it. The human representatives nodded in agreement. They had proven these truths in battle, and now they would prove them in peace. From this day forward, Do One concluded, humanity will be recognized not as a subject species, but as full partners in the coalition. Their unique gifts will help guide us all toward a future none of us could have imagined alone. As the assembly voted to approve the Earth Directive, Do One looked at the human representatives with new understanding. They had come so far, so fast, not despite the challenges they had faced, but because of them. Every obstacle had become an opportunity, every setback a step forward. The coalition had sought to conquer Earth. Instead, they had found something far more valuable. A species that could teach them how to transcend their own limitations, how to turn adversity into advancement, how to see possibilities where others saw only problems. As the ceremony concluded, Do One knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. Humanity's journey to the stars had only just begun, and they would transform the galaxy just as they had transformed everything else they touched. This was their true gift, not just the ability to adapt and overcome, but to improve and transform everything they encountered. The galaxy would never be the same, and that Do One now understood was exactly what it needed. He very act of resistance into a force for rapid evolution.